Hello there, Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here. This is going to be my video update for the day. Probably actually going to do another one this afternoon. I'm in Orlando, safe and sound from that beast. Been there, done that. Not going to go sit in the eye wall of a darn near Category 5 hurricane. We've set up a whole bunch of equipment into the path of this thing, so we are documenting it to the best of our ability using technology. I'll show you that in just a moment. I know that there's a lot of focus and stress and anxiety on what's going to be happening in Southwest Florida, and certainly rightfully so, but I want to drive home the point that this is not just going to stop after it hits the coast. This is going to go up into the greater Orlando area. We're talking Arcadia before that, and all of those rural towns along the way up to Orlando, and then eventually this is going to exit into the Atlantic, and this is going to become a Northeast Florida problem, a southeastern coastal Georgia problem, and a South Carolina problem. So let's get on with it. I'll show you what's happening out there with the current stats. As you know, a historic day here, knocking on the door of Category 5, top winds 155 miles per hour, and this is what it looks like from the satellite animation perspective. That's terrible. That is what we say when we talk about it only takes one. Getting ready to make landfall down here near the Charlotte Harbor area, and an absolute lethal destructive storm surge will move in with that core. We're already seeing signs of that now. Extreme wind warning is in effect. This whole area all through here near the core of this extremely dangerous hurricane, all of that is going to be moving very slowly up towards this way and then off into the Atlantic, and that is one of the biggest problems with this. It's not moving slow enough to self-destruct upwell water. It is moving slow enough, though, that it is going to have lingering impacts for a huge part of Florida. Just a very, very terrible situation unfolding here in that region, unfortunately. So here's the radar animation. Let it load up. This is from Dr. Mark Nissenbaum over at Florida State University, and there's that core that we talk about. I'm going to pause it on the last frame right there. This is the core. When we talk about the core, that is it right there. That's that eye wall, and that's going to be moving in to the Southwest Florida area. So Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda, Charlotte Harbor, up to Arcadia. Eventually, of course, that's inland. Get ready. This is it. This is when it's going to be terrifying and in some cases unsurvivable as that surge gets driven in like a jet engine. We saw that during Hurricane Michael. It'll be a pretty rapid rise in the water, but then it gets sort of just shot in very quickly with the eye wall there, especially if it stays intact like we are seeing here on the radar animation. And then the other big problem, all of this reflectivity that you see here extending up into Central Florida, that is rain. And the rain is just going to keep on coming and keep on coming, and that's going to be another part of this disaster that we need to take seriously. So let me go back to the National Hurricane Center. We're going to talk about impacts real quick. I'm sure you know this, but let's take a look again. The peak surge values in that purple area, 12 feet plus. So anywhere from Inglewood south to Bonita Beach. Sorry, a lot of stuff going on. I have to just slow down myself. So down to that area of the purple, I mean, unsurvivable. I'm not 12 feet tall. 18 feet will go over single-story homes in most cases, bulldoze a lot of structures, a very, very dangerous situation. You've got minimal time at all right now to get out or at least evacuate to higher floors. Move your cars if you can, because you've only got about an hour, if that, and this is really going to be starting to come in to the Charlotte Harbor area and points south. We'll zoom in on a track map in just a moment. But as I was saying, up here along the East Coast, don't want to ignore the areas in blue, but 1 to 3 feet you can handle. That's beach erosion and other problems. 3 to 5 feet, that is a much bigger problem, and that extends all the way up into near Georgetown, South Carolina. And there will be some storm surge here, potentially from areas near the Suwannee River south, but it is this terrible zone right through here down to the Keys where they had tremendous flooding last night. I think a lot of people were taken by surprise. Our camera at Key West, I'll show you in just a minute, captured that. It went offline for a little bit. The network was having issues, but it came back. Just an historic event, and this is going to be remembered for a long time to come. We know that. but it is time to continue to think about impacts beyond the landfall here along the coast. So along those lines, let me zoom back up here, scroll back up here, I should say, and let's focus on that rainfall. So anywhere in this reddish color, I'm going to outline it in black so that it can stand out. We're talking 10 to 15 inches of rain, and this is cumulative, okay, the quantitative precipitation forecast, kind of a worst case scenario. And then the sort of pinkish color, or whatever that is, magenta, I don't know, 15 to 20 inches of rain. Hold on, let me turn that off. We don't need that anymore. So 15 inches of rain to 20 inches of rain, that is going to be an enormous problem, massive flooding concerns, and that's going to incorporate the Orlando, Lakeland, all those areas in between, even Tampa, and all the way up to Ocala. We're talking more than a foot of rain possible in those locations. So do not ignore that as a potential major hazard. And the high risk, at least a 70% chance of excessive rainfall, flash flooding, these high risk days, on the Great Plains, when we get a moderate or a high risk and there's thousands of chasers that go out there for the tornadoes, this is very similar. A high risk of flooding is very destructive, like a high risk of tornadoes would be, or just general severe weather in the Great Plains. So be ready for this. And then for South Carolina, that's not to be ignored either. A moderate risk of flooding down to the Savannah River Valley. So, this is not over once it hits the coast. Please take that into consideration as we go forward with this system. So on our interactive tracking map off the HurricaneTrack Insider site, this is where we have all of the different cameras set up. But real quick, just want to show you, this is the track. It's supposed to go out into the Atlantic here, re-strengthen some, and there's even a hurricane watch up now in South Carolina, because maybe this becomes a hurricane again after it supposedly will weaken over land. We'll see about that. But this is going to be a problem, and then the remnants of this will move up into the upstate of South Carolina, or at least close to it, west of Charlotte, and into the foothills, the Piedmont, and parts of the Appalachians there of North Carolina. So I just have to emphasize over and over, it's not finished when this makes landfall in a few hours. It's not going to just die away, and that is the end of it. This is going to impact many, many millions of people from Florida all the way up into the southeast there, Georgia and the Carolinas. So you need to be thinking about this over the next few days. The slow-moving nature of it, once the storm surge and ridiculous wind impacts subside, if you want to say that, and they will eventually, the threat is going to be from the very heavy rain because of the slow movement, no doubt about it. So let me zoom in and show you some of our assets that we have down here. This is the Key West cam, and hopefully it'll pull up here. Gotta let it load, tickle it a little bit, as they say. So it's calming down from where it was in Key West, still some waves coming in, but the big surge that they saw last night has subsided, so that is certainly good news. Marco Island, unfortunately, this camera went offline. Did it? I'm waiting to see if it comes back. Wouldn't that be something? Nope, it's offline. That's what I thought. I think there are network issues down there, or something just happened with the network inside the box. It happens. Gremlins, what can you do? But we still have other cameras down here. This is out on Captiva Island, and we'll wait for this to load up. No storm surge just yet, but that should be coming in the next hour or so. This is right there on Captiva Island. This will give you an idea of where it's located. We'll zoom in. We do geolocate these right where they are set up. And then we have other camera systems and weather stations all throughout this area to capture the impacts. This one right here I think is going to be really interesting at the Punta Gorda Marina. That's just what we call it. In the downtown Punta Gorda area, the water here could come up at least 10 feet, maybe 12 to 15. We will just have to wait and see. The track of it, though, there's the track. That's the skinny black line. As I showed you, it is not a skinny black line. It is that. All of that is going to be moving up through all of this. So kind of like that. You're going to take this and just move it right up there. Yes, that's going to be a massive problem. Really focusing the water here into Charlotte Harbor and then into the river system here of Fort Myers. The beaches down there, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, just an awful, awful situation. But then again, inland, this is going to track inland. We have a camera over here in Arcadia. They were slammed hard during Hurricane Charlie back in 2004. I want to monitor this, so we have a camera here to see what happens there. And this is going to march its way up towards Orlando. That is where I am. Like I said, not going to do that again. No reason. There's no reason for me to be out there in our truck sitting in the eye wall of a near Category 5 hurricane. Yes, it's technically exciting, but I've done it enough times. I think the technology is doing what it needs to do, and then I can be here in Orlando where we have power, where I am safe, and I can manage things on the back end. Our whole infrastructure has been slow today because of all the people trying to get in and all of the processes that we have going on running all of this equipment. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. You know, things are overloaded, and we're working on that, and I can best do that and manage it, do emails, respond to people, and I can do that here from Orlando. And very important here, sometime probably tonight, maybe tomorrow, seriously considering setting up, we have 2 camera systems left, something up here, because this area is expected to see, as I showed you, potentially 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. Why? Because when this comes offshore, the counterclockwise flow will send onshore flow to this area. And so there's going to be storm surge flooding, very large crashing waves. That'll go into the St. Johns River. That's going to be flooding. I mean, I wish we had 6 or 8 of us and 100 cameras. Maybe we'll get there someday. That's a lot to manage. I can only imagine that headache. But then after Florida, I'm really going to concentrate on Charleston, South Carolina. And you might say to yourself, why? It looks like it's going to go in near Hilton Head. Yes, but the wind field is big, and it is going to push a lot of water up in here. In Charleston Harbor, the battery down there, I know it well. Been down there many times. Matthew and other events for Irma. Actually, we weren't there for Irma. I missed it because we were down in Florida. We didn't have as much equipment as we do now. And I regretted missing Irma because it had this one band that came up there and really socked Charleston pretty good. And I don't want to miss that again. And so I'm going to be traveling up there with my colleague Matt sometime Thursday. That's tomorrow, I guess, to make sure we are set up in the Charleston area. So that is what is happening with all of this. We appreciate everybody that is supporting the project through Patreon. If you want to do so, that's how you have access to the camera systems. I get a little bit of grief every once in a while. It's not often. People think, you know, well, why are you charging money for this? It should be free. I mean, I can't work for free, and if it was free, it would absolutely crash because it would cost thousands of dollars per day, probably, to have the infrastructure to put something like this out there for free. And if we just rely on maybe the casual donation, that's not going to work either. This is a way to grow the project for the future. Yes, it's how I earn my paycheck. This is what I do for a living. I don't do something else, and this is a hobby. So enough of that. This is how you can join in and support it if you want to. And I'd love to hear from you beyond today and tomorrow and the next day. If you're on our Patreon, how we can work together. Maybe we can set up some assets at your house permanently. We do this beyond hurricane season. Hurricanes are the focus. This is a long-term project, and your support goes a long way. We're in it together. You know, the old Jerry Maguire line there. Hate to use it, but it's true. You help me, help you, and we can get some really good, helpful information out there, build the technology so that we can study these events as they happen and then learn from them going forward. All right? So really, I really do appreciate all of the support, just a teeny tiny amount of negativism out there, but I can handle that. I've done this long enough to weather those storms when they come along. Everything else, though, 99.9% has been extremely positive, and for that, I am very, very grateful. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. The back-end team that makes this happen, we all appreciate that as well. We really do. All right, I'm going to put this online for you. I will do another update this evening as we really talk about the inland impacts here of Florida, for Florida, from Ian here, and of course the rest of the Southeast. I'm Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack. I'll be back with you with another update again this evening.